Hello, I'm Brother Antonio. I am a Redemptorist brother. I was born and raised in Mexico, and I'm here to share with you some of my faith journey. So I am the second born of a family of three. But for the first years of my life, for the first 13 years of my life, it was my brother, myself, and my mom. My father worked in the United States, and we would only see him for a few months out of the year. So during the early years of my life, my mother taught us how to pray the rosary, and that was a devotion that we did almost every day. I remember that as a child, I could probably recite the litany to Our Lady before I could even read or write. I went to Catholic school also for elementary and middle school. And when I was in school, one of the devotions that I learned was the devotion to the Sacred Heart. And that's a devotion that I still carry with me, and it's very dear to my heart. Later on, I became an altar server at my parish in my hometown, and I enjoyed that very much. I remember that when I was about 8 years old, I went through the process for confirmation. I was very young, and I don't remember too much about that process. And at the age of 9, I went through the process of preparation for First Communion. When I look back in that period of my life, I think it's very special that I did my First Communion on the feast day of St. Joseph, because he is a saint that I admire very much, and he is my patron saint. One of the things that I did after being an altar server in the church is that I became a lector. I was probably 12 at that time, and I really enjoyed that ministry a lot. It's actually my favorite ministry to do in church, in the liturgy, is to be a lector and being able to proclaim the Word of God. After a couple of years of middle school and all of that, I went to high school, and I went to a public high school, and it was a very different environment for me, and it was very new. I met new people, made new friends, but also during this time, as I was getting older, I started to withdraw a little bit from the church, so I stopped being a lector. And I would go to church on the weekends with my parents, but I wouldn't go into the church as often anymore. So I would stay outside while Mass was going on. I would just hear it, but I wasn't inside. When I was about 16 or so, my father unfortunately got sick, and he was on the verge of losing his vision. And this was a very rough time for us. He had to go through several surgeries. My parents had to start selling property and things like that. My father was forced to retire. And this was a very, very difficult time for all of us at home, because the recovery process was very difficult for him, and consequently on us. And his doctor recommended that he retired, so he had to come back to the States and go through the process of retirement, and we had to come with him because he couldn't be on his own because he could barely see. And that was a big moment of transition for my family and for myself. Once my family and I were in the United States, it was a weird time for me because I didn't know how long we were going to be here for. So I wasn't prepared to move my whole life here. But the process of my father getting better and the retirement and all of that became a little bit complicated, and he had to go see more doctors. And instead of being here for 6 weeks, it just turned into the whole summer, and then it was time for me to start school. So I had to just get used to the idea that this was my life now and that I was in the United States. Everything was very strange for me here, and one of the only things that was familiar to me was church. So going to church with my family on Sundays was probably one of the only things that was kind of familiar, aside from being with them. I started to feel very homesick, and I remember that at some point a group of priests came to my parish to do a mission, and during this mission I was greeting the priests, and one of them handed me a small holy card, and it was a card of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, which is very special for me because it reminded me of a card that was in our table at home, and it was of Our Lady of Perpetual Help. So it was a reminder of home. During this time of being in the United States, after a few months of being here, I was invited to my very first retreat, and I remember it being a wonderful experience of God, and I had never felt anything like I was feeling at that retreat. So after this retreat, I started to become involved in the church again, and I went to my parish and I became a lector again, and I really enjoyed that ministry. Then I got involved with a group of men in my parish, and after a while I became involved with the young adults in my parish as well, and I really enjoyed the ministry there. I became part of the youth group committee and served at different retreats, and it was just, I was very, very involved in serving and helping out. And after some time of serving, people started to ask me questions about whether I wanted to be a priest or if I had considered it. And my answer was always no, because I was afraid. And I even remember in my prayers praying to God that I wanted to serve in any way, in any capacity that He wanted me, but I would say, please, just don't call me to be a missionary or a priest, because I was just so terribly afraid of Him calling me to that. But the questions continued, and after a while, I started to think about maybe I should discern a vocation. And it seemed to me like I wasn't as afraid anymore, and I was more willing to start discerning a vocation for religious life or the priesthood. Part of the process of discerning my vocation was to increase my life of prayer, and this meant visits to the Blessed Sacrament, praying the Rosary on a regular basis, finding a spiritual director, talking to priests, and all of that. And I did some of that, but I also attended some vocational retreats, and I was in contact with a priest in Mexico who was starting a Society of Apostolic Life, and he invited me to come and stay with them for a while as part of my discernment. And the idea was that I would eventually join the group. So I went to Mexico, and I stayed with them for probably 6 months or so. And after a while of being there, I realized that even though I maybe wanted to discern a vocation to religious life, that was not the place for me. Also, during that time, I learned about religious brothers, and I felt that maybe that's where God was calling me, instead of being a priest, to remain as a brother. So I packed my things again, and I came back to the States, and I started to reconsider my life choices and everything that was happening in my life, and take some time off from discerning my vocation and just reevaluate my life. Once I was back in the United States, I needed a job, so I went back to my old job, which was at a restaurant. I was working there for a while, then I got another job at a loan collection office, and I worked there for about 3 years or so. I was actually very good at my job, and during this time, I was still going to church on Sundays. I started dating. I dated quite a bit, and I was considering just where I was gonna go for the next step in my life. Even though I was happy in my last relationship, I felt like maybe I should consider my vocation to religious life again. And I started talking to the Redemptorists, and we started a process of discernment that went on for a little bit too long maybe. But finally in 2017, I was accepted. I was not expecting to be accepted. In fact, it seemed like I needed to wait 6 months, but I think it was divine intervention that I met one of the superiors, and it just, all of a sudden I was having an interview to be considered as a candidate, and everything happened so quickly that I only had 2 weeks after the interview to quit my job, pack up my things, and move to New York to start my formation with the Redemptorists. So in January of 2017, I joined the Redemptorists. I went up to New York for my postulancy, which was 2.5 years. After that, I went to Lima, Ohio for 1 year of novitiate, which is like a 1-year retreat. And after that, I came to San Antonio. In 2020, 2020, I believe it was. It has been a wonderful time. I have gotten to do a lot of ministries, know a lot of people, and really increase my spirituality, even get to know myself better, and in light of that, develop my own spirituality and prayer life. I've gotten into a deepened understanding of my vocation, and I still continue to discern my vocation every day and ask God if this is still what He wants me to do, if this is, if I'm doing what He's calling me to do, and even encountering Him every day in the people that I meet and in the people that I minister to, and the people that minister to me as well, and the education that I'm receiving, and just everything that I do. It has been a wonderful journey. It has had its up and downs like everything else, but overall I'm very happy and very excited in this faith journey, and I'm just continuing to trust Him and see where He takes me next and what He asks of me.